Mongkok is tense tonight after scuffles during the day between protesters and taxi drivers who began tearing down barriers to enforce a court order to clear the streets.
Police had to intervene, allowing the protesters to hold their ground. But the confrontations had rekindled fears that Mongkok is on the verge of a riot. ATV's Arthur Ericula reports.
It was another reflection of how volatile Mongkok has become, as a queue of taxis blocked off a section of Argyle Street between Nathan Road and Sayang Choi Street. The main junction has been blocked for weeks by Occupy protesters. The angry drivers were armed with a court order to clear the area so they could resume normal business, which has been badly hit by the blockade of one of the city's busiest thoroughfares. They brought along tools with them to clear barricades at the junction, set up by pro-democracy demonstrators. A crane truck was also called in to help clear the barricades. This led to a standoff between the drivers and a growing crowd of demonstrators manning the barricades on Nathan Road. In the end, the drivers were persuaded to leave, taking their truck with them. They said police had persuaded them to go, warning of possible violence. The drivers will consider their next move when they apply for the injunction to be extended on Friday. On the other side of the junction, another group of men carrying tools started dismantling barricades on Argyle Street between Nathan Road and Portland Street. There were tense scenes as demonstrators confronted the unidentified men removing the blockades, and police had to intervene. While the men argued they were following the court order, the demonstrators accused them of stirring up trouble. Police did not try to stop the men, but stepped in when their face-off with protesters became tense. Demonstrators supporting the police and the removal of the blockades were also at the scene, with flowers and chocolate for the officers on duty. They soon left the area when arguments broke out with the protesters. Police denied any involvement in the move to clear the streets and again warned people to stay away from the area, particularly young children.
Some parents still brought their kids, even a 2-month-old baby, to the occupied street in Mongkok to take part in the unlawful assemblies. This is extremely dangerous and irresponsible. They may get hurt during the confrontations.
Police have repeatedly warned that Mongkok is on the verge of a riot, and the lawlessness there cannot be allowed to go on forever. Earlier in the day, staff tore down posters and decorations outside the HSBC branch on Nathan Road so it could reopen. The bank was able to open briefly on Friday when police cleared barricades and pushed protesters out of the area, only to see them take it back after violent clashes. Arthur Ericula, ATV News.
There were more confrontations between protesters and CITIC Tower staff trying to remove barricades under a court order to clear the area near government headquarters.
While many are fed up with the blockades, a new survey shows support for the protest movement has actually gone up since it began.
The struggle for control of Long Wall Road in Admiralty continued today. Staff of CITIC Tower, acting on a court injunction, removed the barricades outside the building yesterday. But student protesters re-erected the barriers and today foiled another attempt by CITIC Tower staff to remove them. Despite the court ordering protesters to leave the area, many remained defiant and stood their ground between the building and the government compound. A representative of CITIC Tower's owner told the protesters that the barricades are blocking the emergency exits and car park, but his explanation was dismissed. League of Social Democrats lawmaker Leung Kwok Hung said protesters would remove the barricades if there was a fire. He urged the demonstrators to remain calm and not to take any action as the injunction is being challenged in court. With the mass sit-ins now in their 25th day, protesters remained camped on Harcourt Road. Some had taken the protests in their stride and tried to carry on as usual. Many students vowed to stay put, saying last night's talks between their leaders and senior government officials gave them no reason to take down their tents and go home.
I'm not going to leave in this case because I can see that the government doesn't face the problem to us and they they don't answer our question directly. They just escape our question.
And this demonstrator accused the government of lacking sincerity in the talks and vowed to stay on the streets. The protests have been gaining more support since they began, according to a Chinese university survey. Of the 800 people interviewed earlier this month, 35.5% backed the Occupy Central movement, up 7 percentage points from last month. Many of the supporters are younger people with higher education. The survey also found that 53.7% of the respondents believe it was not appropriate for the police to fire tear gas at unarmed people on the first day of the protests, but 22% backed the officers.